Hello again. This is Kathy Grace, co-director of the Graduate Center for the Study of Early Learning, and I'm so happy that you've joined us again for another conversation with state leaders, specifically around the issues related to early childhood. And I am so happy that my good friend, my longtime friend, Oleta Fitzgerald, is joining us today. She's the director of the Children's Defense Fund's Southern Regional Office. And Oleta, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Dr. Grace, for having me. It's good to be with you all.
Oleta and I have known each other for 25 years at least. And Oleta, could you just talk a little bit about what you do as the director of the Children's Defense Fund Southern Regional Office and where your interests lie in the state of Mississippi specifically?
Thanks, Dr. Grace. Kathy, as you know, as you have been a colleague over the years, you just say, for a quarter of a century or more. The Children's Defense Fund is a 48-year-old child advocacy organization. It's based in Washington, D.C. and was founded by a woman named Marian Wright Edelman, who holds I guess you would say, the distinction of being the first Black woman to pass the bar in Mississippi. Marian was a Yale graduate, but she was the first Black woman to pass the bar in Mississippi and worked here in Mississippi for some years before moving to Washington and starting the Children's Defense Fund. We work on all issues related to children, children's health insurance, childcare, education, and when I say childcare, I mean early childhood education. I want to make that point, and child welfare issues. Over the course of the years, CDF has had several offices in Mississippi. I opened the CDF Southern Regional Office in 1995, and since that time, we have worked in southern states across the region on issues related to early childhood education, welfare reform, and the supports that families need to be able to move from welfare to work, and access to quality education. So in a sense, we are like a relay team. The state offices, I'm one of seven, I'm the only regional office of the Children's Defense Fund, but there are seven other state offices across the country. We feed up and we feed down on issues like things that are happening with families that are struggling in the states. We feed up to the national office, for instance, the Children's Health Insurance Program. When we realized that many children whose families could not afford health care were not covered by Medicaid, it was the beginning of the conversation around getting policies for the Children's Health Insurance Program. Well, once those programs are passed by Congress, they have to come back into the states and are implemented at the state level through state legislation most of the time. That's true for most federal programs. So we do a lot of work, not only in ensuring that families are able to access the resources that are available to them, but working all the way from the state legislature down to where the family and the child is. Outreach programs, that's work that you and I have been engaged in for over 20 years in terms of how we best use resources that are in the state, not only for families, but in systems. So our work around systems alignment in the early education field is something that we think is very important work.
Well, as you've mentioned, you've been doing this for quite some time, and I'm sure that the last 2 years have been something that you didn't anticipate happening, nor did I, as far as the impact the pandemic has had on Mississippi families and children. And in your estimation, or as far as what you have observed, do you see us at this point in time starting to pull out of some of the ramifications that we've had to experience with regard to loss of work, the health condition of folks in our state, the children's increase in the numbers that we see of those who have gotten COVID. Just as far as how much of an impact do you see COVID is still being on a lot of us?
Well, I'm prayerful that we are pulling out of COVID in a way that we will be able to get back to some form of life as we had prior to. I am concerned that we don't know the impact of COVID yet. That the impact that it's had on children in terms of health and wellness and the wellness of families, the learning losses that we anticipate will be felt primarily among low income and moderate income families who were not able to stay home and work. And so where children were and what their experiences have been. I think that we will see some setback. I mean, it's every system has been impacted by this, from the economy to education to the childcare industry. So I think that I feel like we're coming out. Of course, I felt like that before the variant hit us. So I'm hopeful that this time that we are able to start moving forward. And I'm hopeful that we will be thoughtful and systematic and methodical about how to identify the needs of children and address those needs. So at the same time that, as you say, we look at the impact of COVID, we are also looking at a great opportunity with resources that have come into the state as a result of COVID. And there's a lot of new money in the state. A concern I have is that money is not being targeted in the best way possible to take care of the needs of the child through the family. That, as we do with so many other things, Kathy, our systems are disjointed. That it's a great opportunity for us as a state to look at how to align all of our systems so that the individual family and child gets what he or she needs to be able to overcome and withstand the setbacks from COVID. So that is, that's something we got a lot of money coming. For instance, our work, yours and my work together over the last 25 years, 26 years or so, to make sure that every child, as they are entering the early childhood experience, is entering a world that's preparing them to be educated. That childcare and the childcare system is seen as the precursor for education in the state. That then is aligned with what children are going to be expected to do when they go into pre-K or K-12 school systems, and then that we work with them throughout that system. I don't know that we have the kind of deliberative, strategic plan in place to do that, but it's an awesome opportunity for us to get that done. And particularly if, as you know, we've been working a long time trying to get a national focus on childcare from the original Child Care Development Block Grant Program. CDF was deeply involved in getting passed, to now where there is a general acceptance that children need early education and that they need a pre-K experience. Now, there's going to be more money coming to the state and to all of the southern states, well, to all of the states, period. We should be talking now about how that money lines up with K-12 education and how children are getting what they need to be prepared to enter, as we talk about, to enter public school, kindergarten ready. And we know that doesn't happen across the board, but that's going to take all of the systems working together, the childcare industry, the public school systems, the Head Start systems, the Department of Human Services, the Mississippi Department of Education. I mean, it is not a one person, one agency kind of deliberation that needs to take place. And we talked about that. And I asked you 20 years ago, like, Kathy, this is 2020. Why hasn't this been done? Why is it that that we don't have alignment so that our dollars are going to places and targeted so that we make sure that that child is able to make it through the system successfully? And you said to me, because it's hard work. Well, it's not really hard work. It's hard to get people to work with each other and to break down the walls of systems. And we've had CCAC after CCAC after CCAC, and we still have not gotten this right. So I think we're challenged with what faces us as a result of COVID. We've got a lot of resources coming to the state now, and some more that I think in the future will come, and that we all should put our heads together, business people, school folks, higher ed people, every systems building people, to say, okay, we've got these resources in the state. Let's see how we can spend our money together to make sure that these children are able to come out of school in 12 years or in 16 years and be able to function in an economy that every economist, every futurist, everybody knows that the economy is changing and we can't continue to educate children the way we are. So I know that's a long, long story, but I think that that's our opportunity.
Well, I was going to ask you, and you brought it up right at the end there of your remarks about the world of business and how now it's reported across the country that there is a child care provider shortage, and that is starting to impact the economy from a standpoint of workers returning to work. And now it appears that maybe the business community is starting to make the connection between early care and education and putting women particularly back in the workforce. Do you see that may actually roll over into some of the thoughts here in our state as far as how this is important to growing the economy?
Well, we can go back again 20 years. The Sanderson Farms had a child care center at its plant. So it's not something new to business. There are business leaders across the country that have been talking about the importance of early education and ready nation and mission readiness and all of that with military folks. They all recognize that our world is becoming what is technologically driven. And that if we are not preparing children to be able to function in that world, then they're going to get locked out of an economy. And we think that we have poor families now. We're guaranteeing generational poverty. And we could back that up just as easily as I said that, and have business come to the table with education and early education practitioners and talk about how important it is. Years ago, Kathy, we didn't know about brain science. I knew nothing about brain science when I was had my children were much younger. So we know there is not a shortage of information in terms of what we know children need to be able to be successful. What there is a shortage of is the kind of strategic thinking and collaboration that it takes to make sure every child can move through the system. The difference, we've just released a report called Truthful Eyes, the state of education in Mississippi, where we are comparing A school districts to D and F school districts. There are 6 school districts, 10 counties covered. And the one thing that jumped off the page at me, well, one, we all knew, as researchers said, poverty has the greatest impact on a child's education, greater than race. In our state, it's disproportionate because there's a disproportionate number of children of color who are poor. And while there might be 1 in 7 children who are poor in Mississippi, 1 in 7 white children, 1 in 2 Black children are in poverty. And about a third of those are what we call ingratiated poverty, which means that their incomes are half of the poverty level, which is about $25,000, $26,000 for a family of 4. So now, you know, just as a parent, just as anybody with common sense, what $25,000 is going to buy you for a family of 4. So that you know that some children are not, their families are not able to support them with the early childhood education that they need to escape poverty. Now, take that and set that aside, and we know that even with that, that almost another half of the children are coming into public school, not having been in an early childhood education system at all. So now we know that if we deal with that from a business sense, and we take our money and we say, this is what we're going to do to ensure all of these children come to the scratch line ready to participate in K-12 education, which is underfunded in the state. So then you're saying to the K-12 system, you know, take the, in areas that are high poverty areas, take the resources you got, and you've got to make up all the difference over here for this child that comes to you raw, just say like a raw product. Somebody else can, you know, you go to an A school district and got a child coming in there, and you got half of your automobile put together. So, you know, you got the first third of the automobile is ready to build on top of. So if we look at it systematically and target our resources to the children who need them the most. Now, in that same study, Truthful Eyes, that has been done in conjunction with school superintendents, and they are excited about the data that has been pulled together. It's an awesome report. And that same report, what shocked me was, even in the A school districts, in the best school district, there was less than 60% of the children scaled as career and college ready. And that's troubling. And if what the test scores are showing us is that in our best school districts, in the very best one, less than 60% of the children are not deemed career and college ready in 2021, where are we going to be in 2030? Where are we going to be unless we start doing something really different? So I think the business community is critical in the sense of helping people in public service not run programs, but to talk about how to build systems, how to take a business analysis and systems building and put our money on the table to make sure every child is getting what he or she needs to be college and career ready when they come out of school, whether it's 12th grade or whether it's P16. So I think business is critical to this conversation. The other reason business is critical, I think, to this conversation is they know where the jobs are going to be. And we're starting to hear from them here and there. We're hearing from Ingalls. We're hearing from the military. We're hearing from folks that we're not creating job-ready young people. And this is on our watch. And then we got thrown COVID. So I think that there is, I don't want to say, I think we can use our money, all of the monies that we have in our systems, much more effectively if our systems work together.
One of the things that I am very interested in reading your report that you just mentioned, and I'm glad that you have brought it up. Is one of the things that interests me has to do with funding of the A schools and the ranking A schools and the D or the F. Most people in Mississippi, I think, are under the impression that the federal government is pouring money in our education system, which if you and I both know, and people who are in education know, that that's just not the case, that the most of the money comes from local or state allocations. And in some communities, in some counties, where the tax base is lower, then that means less money can go into the public schools, but because of the lack of the overall level of income in that particular county. Did your report investigate, or did you look at the funding that comes into these school districts at a local level? Is the tax base, does it have anything to do with what you're talking about in these resources?
We did not go into, there, I mean, there's so much information. Pam Shaw with P3 Strategies and whippersnapper analysts pull this information from so many sources. It doesn't go directly into how much money each school district gets, but it does talk about the tax base in each of those school districts and the variables in those school districts related to tax base. So you got poor children that are suffering a double whammy. They don't have the early education preparedness that they need. And then their schools are struggling because the local tax school, a lot of the money that funds, as you know, school districts is based on local taxes, on ad valorem taxes. If you don't have a tax base, then you get less money. If you got a thriving economy, so it is a situation of them that got shall get, and them that's not shall lose, because this is the most glaring example in all of this conversation about equity in the country now. How we fund schools is probably the most glaring example of inequity, because it's based upon, I mean, a child's opportunity can be based upon where that child is born and where that child lives. So it is critical that people understand, you know, even in communities where you would think that folks would know, people who are even teachers will say to me, well, I just don't understand why Jackson can't do what Clinton is doing. And I have to say, well, because Clinton got teachers, Clinton got teachers in content area, Clinton's got a tax base, Clinton's got higher income parents, Clinton's got 2-parent families. You know, there are all kinds of variables in terms of what Clinton takes a child at 5 and can do with that child than where a child at 5 might enter the JPS school district without that tax base. So, and with higher percentages of children coming from families that are struggling. And so we need to understand what we're dealing with, that and then build from there. You know, we could point fingers at people all the time, but you know, Kathy, we always start from the child. If we want to change the trajectory of the state of Mississippi, if we want to change that. Now, there is a question in my mind of whether we really truly want to change the trajectory of Mississippi, or if we want to be a closed society. That if we want to hold on to our isms, that we want to keep out all progressive thinking, that we want to build an economy by paying somebody to come dance with us, instead of someone coming because they see what we have to offer. And in an environment that is becoming more and more an economy that is technologically driven, which means that we could have jobs in Anguilla, Mississippi. You know, we don't have to drive to Memphis. We don't have to drive to Jackson. If we prepare our children, that we could have teachers with content area specialists coming to our schools if we had internet, where we can't get teachers to move, or where we can't get people with the STEM backgrounds until we can get there. But if we just keep doing what we're doing, we're gonna get, and if we do with this new money, what we've been doing, it's gonna be a travesty. It is going to be a travesty. We need to be thinking forward and planning forward from a business-minded perspective to ensure that our children, all of Mississippi's children, if we want them to stay in Mississippi, we got to find something that they can do in Mississippi. And the jobs that we have now, low pay, low wage, low benefit, jobs that are in, in an economy built around nexus areas, like the jobs are going to be here. And then you just look at the number of jobs that have been created in Mississippi Delta. Compare that to what's going on in the state. Now, there's this new thing called Accelerate Mississippi. You get all excited about the words they say. It's an opportune time to have this kind of conversation.
Well, I know when I have discussions with some of my friends over in Arkansas, because that's my home state, it's very telling when someone who lives in Natchez can drive across the Mississippi River Bridge into Arkansas and they can get a minimum wage of $12 based on our $7.35 or $7.25. And when you're looking at having to feed your family and have the resources in order to live in a place that is safe, and make sure you have a car that runs and that you have some kind of backup health care plan, it makes it difficult to try to convince folks to stay over in Natchez when 20 minutes literally across the river puts them in a whole nother income bracket. And I think that all of these discussions, even though it may not sound like your traditional early childhood discussion, is the new early childhood discussions that we've got to have for all the reasons that you have just discussed. And I truly hope that there can be more conversations before, as you said, the money is allocated, because there's going to be workforce money that really early childhood folks have never tapped into before. There's going to be funds that I think we desperately need in mental health services to young children that we are not currently providing. And so it does require us to put on a different lens and have a different mindset because we're already somewhat behind in some of these systems that you've discussed. And so we've got to play catch up as well as move ahead. So we have two responsibilities, I think, as far as what is going to be called, what we're going to be called on to do in the next year, for sure.
Yes. Yeah. And let me say this, Kathy, I'm glad you brought up workforce. I think people in the audience probably don't realize that we heard a lot in the news about TANF and the welfare fraud and all of that. Folks probably don't realize that when we talk about poor families, that in Mississippi, we only have about 208 adults on welfare in the TANF program. There are some 3,000 plus welfare cases in the state, but most of those are child-only cases. We have 208 people in several months ago on DHS's website that are getting TANF, that are getting welfare. We get about $96 million. This is not COVID money. We get about $96 million a year in a block grant from the federal government for our welfare population. How is that money being used? How strategically more creative could we get about how to use that money to help families attached to some kind of work? The rules we have about child support enforcement, the rules we have about workforce attachment. You know, if you live, I grew up in rural Mississippi. I grew up in rural Madison County. To get a job, you got to have a car. To get a car, you got to have a job. So how do we fix this broken connection to economic opportunity? And like you say, I did kind of go off on a tangent, but early childhood education is like the font. It is like the embryo for economic development. If we can educate children, or as the saying goes, we can try to fix broken men, but we can educate children. We know how to do it. We know what it takes to do it. We just need to do it.
Well, I'm not going to say another word because you have just wrapped up exactly what was the whole essence of this conversation. And I am so grateful that you took the time to talk with us. And I may be touching back with you in, say, March, so we can see how this next legislative session has turned out, as far as hopefully getting more information about how we're going to, as a state, spend some of the money that is coming into the state that the governor still has, that we hadn't even discussed, that he's yet to allocate and discuss about planning for what's going to happen there, in addition to all these other funds that we have just touched on. But Oleta Fitzgerald, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Kathy.
As always, it's fun to talk to you, and you challenge my thinking every time we talk.
You too. It's good to have you. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.